Is there really an exact moment when your body stops burning sugar and starts burning fat? This is one of the most common questions in the world of fasting, weight loss, walking, and metabolic health. People want a clear answer. They want a specific number. They want to know if fat burning starts after 8 hours, 12 hours, 16 hours, or 24 hours without food. And it makes sense, because if you are fasting, skipping snacks, walking before breakfast, or trying to lose belly fat, you naturally want to know when the real fat-burning process begins. But here is the truth most people never hear. Your body does not work like a light switch. It does not suddenly flip from sugar burning to fat burning in one dramatic second. Instead, your body works more like a fuel mixing system. At almost every moment of the day, it is using a combination of fuels. Sometimes it uses more glucose, sometimes it uses more fat, sometimes it uses stored carbohydrate from glycogen. And during longer fasting periods, it may begin producing more ketones. So the real question is not, when does fat burning start? Because some fat burning is happening almost all the time. The better question is, when does my body begin relying more on stored fat and less on incoming sugar? That is where the science becomes much more interesting. After a meal, especially a meal rich in carbohydrates, your blood sugar rises, your pancreas releases insulin, your muscles and liver begin storing glucose as glycogen. During this period, your body is mostly focused on using and storing the energy that just came in. But as hours pass without food, insulin gradually falls. The liver begins releasing stored glucose to keep your blood sugar stable. Fat cells become a little more willing to release fatty acids. Your muscles and organs slowly begin shifting toward a higher percentage of fat use. This is not instant. It is gradual. And it depends on many things. What you ate, how much you ate, how active you are, how much muscle you have, how insulin sensitive you are, how well you slept, and how often your body practices going without food. One of the biggest myths is that fat burning only starts after 16 hours. That is not completely true. Fat oxidation can increase much earlier, especially when insulin begins to decline. But the percentage of fat being used usually increases as the fast gets longer and stored carbohydrate becomes less dominant. Another myth is that if insulin is present, fat burning is impossible. That is also too simple. Insulin does reduce fat release, but the body still uses a mixture of fuels. Biology is not black and white. It is more like a dimmer switch than an on-off switch. And perhaps the most dangerous myth is this. Burning fat during a fast means you are automatically losing belly fat. Not necessarily. Using fat as fuel during one fasting window is not the same as losing visible belly fat. True fat loss depends on the bigger picture. Total energy balance, insulin sensitivity, sleep, stress, muscle mass, food quality, and repeated healthy patterns over time. So if you are looking for the exact moment your body switches from sugar to fat, the answer is not one universal hour. The real answer is a transition. And to understand that transition, we first need to understand how your body chooses fuel in the first place. To understand when your body shifts from burning more sugar to burning more fat, you first need to understand one simple truth. Your body does not choose fuel randomly. It responds to signals. The strongest signal is the food you just ate. Imagine you finish a meal that contains bread, rice, pasta, fruit, dessert, or any other source of carbohydrates. Your digestive system breaks those carbohydrates down into glucose. That glucose enters your bloodstream, and your blood sugar begins to rise. Your body does not want blood sugar to stay high for too long, so the pancreas releases insulin. Insulin acts like a nutrient manager. It helps move glucose from the bloodstream into cells where it can be used for energy or stored for later. Some glucose enters your muscles, some enters your liver. Inside those tissues, glucose can be stored as glycogen, which is basically the body's short-term carbohydrate reserve. During this fed state, your body naturally uses more glucose because glucose is available. This is not bad. It is normal. When fresh fuel comes in, the body uses it. That is what a healthy metabolism is supposed to do. But while insulin is higher, your body is also receiving a message. Energy is available. There is no urgent need to pull large amounts of fuel from fat cells because food has just arrived. As a result, fat release becomes less active. This is what many people call sugar burning mode. But even here, your body is not burning only sugar. At rest, some tissues still use fat. Your heart, for example, can use fatty acids efficiently. The body is always mixing fuels. The difference is the proportion. Now imagine several hours pass and no new food arrives. The glucose from your meal has been absorbed. Blood sugar begins returning toward baseline. The pancreas no longer needs to release as much insulin. Insulin gradually declines. This decline is one of the most important steps in the fuel switch. As insulin falls, fat cells become more willing to release fatty acids into the bloodstream. These fatty acids can travel to muscles and organs, where they can be burned for energy. At the same time, the liver becomes a central fuel manager. After your meal, the liver stored some glucose as glycogen. But between meals, and especially overnight, the liver begins releasing glucose from glycogen to keep your blood sugar stable. This is crucial because your brain and red blood cells still need glucose, especially in the earlier stages of fasting. So in the beginning of the fast, your body is not suddenly burning only fat. It is using liver glycogen to support blood sugar, while gradually increasing fat use as insulin falls. This is why glycogen matters. Glycogen is like a temporary fuel tank. When the tank is full, the body can rely more on stored carbohydrate. As the tank becomes less dominant over time, fat use increases. The body begins shifting from incoming fuel to stored fuel. This brings us to one of the most important concepts in metabolism: metabolic flexibility. Metabolic flexibility means your body can smoothly switch between glucose and fat depending on the situation. After a meal, it can use glucose well. Between meals, it can access stored fuel. During a walk, it can increase energy use. During sleep, it can maintain blood sugar without needing constant snacks. A metabolically flexible body does not panic the moment food is unavailable. It does not create intense cravings every 2 hours. It does not crash dramatically after every meal. It can move between fed mode and fasting mode without feeling like something is wrong. But when metabolic flexibility is poor, the body may struggle during food gaps. You may feel shaky, irritable, tired, foggy, or desperate for sugar, even though you still have plenty of stored energy. The problem is not that your body has no fuel. The problem is that it has difficulty accessing and switching between fuel sources efficiently. This is why fasting, walking, balanced meals, sleep, and muscle-building habits all matter. They train the body to become better at switching fuels. So the switch from sugar to fat is not one single moment. It is a gradual change in fuel preference, guided mainly by insulin, blood glucose, liver glycogen, fatty acid release, and your overall metabolic flexibility. Now let's follow the timeline from your last meal and see when your body actually begins moving toward more fat-dominant fuel use. The journey from burning mostly sugar to relying more heavily on fat does not happen in one dramatic moment. Instead, it unfolds gradually, hour by hour, as your body constantly evaluates how much fuel is available, how much energy you need, and which source is most efficient at that particular time. Let's begin at the moment you finish your last meal. During the first 2 hours, your body is fully in what scientists call the fed state. Your digestive system is working at full speed. Your stomach is breaking food into smaller particles while your small intestine absorbs nutrients into the bloodstream. Blood glucose rises, especially if the meal contains carbohydrates, and insulin rises in response. At this stage, your body naturally prefers using incoming glucose because it is the easiest and most immediately available fuel. There is no reason to rely heavily on stored fat when fresh energy has just arrived. Many people imagine that fat burning completely stops here, but that isn't true. Your body is still burning a mixture of fuels. However, glucose now provides a larger percentage of the energy, while fat contributes a smaller share. Between hours 2 and 4, digestion continues. Nutrients are still entering the bloodstream, although the rate gradually slows. Muscles absorb glucose and replenish their glycogen stores. The liver also stores glycogen for future use. If the meal was balanced and moderate in size, this process is relatively smooth. If it was extremely large or high in refined carbohydrates, insulin may remain elevated longer. Your body is still primarily operating on recently consumed energy. Now we enter one of the most interesting phases. Between hours 4 and 8, the transition truly begins. Blood glucose gradually returns toward its normal resting level. Insulin begins falling because there is less incoming glucose to manage. As insulin declines, your metabolism quietly starts reorganizing itself. The liver now takes on a much larger role. Instead of receiving glucose from digestion, it begins releasing small amounts of glucose from its glycogen stores to maintain stable blood sugar. This keeps your brain functioning normally without requiring another meal. At the same time, fat cells begin responding to the lower insulin environment. They slowly release more fatty acids into the bloodstream. Muscles, the heart, and many other tissues can begin using a greater proportion of these fatty acids for energy. This is not yet a complete switch. It is the beginning of a gradual shift. Imagine two fuel tanks. One contains glucose and glycogen. The other contains stored fat. As the glucose tank slowly contributes less, the fat tank gradually contributes more. Both tanks are supplying energy simultaneously. The proportions are simply changing. Between hours 8 and 12, many people enter what could be called the early fasting zone. For someone who finishes dinner around 7 in the evening, this often occurs during sleep. Digestion has become much quieter. Blood insulin is generally lower than it was after dinner. Liver glycogen continues supporting blood sugar, while fat oxidation becomes increasingly important. This is why many people who wake up before breakfast are already using a higher percentage of fat than they were immediately after dinner. If they choose to go for a gentle morning walk before eating, their muscles can further increase the use of stored fatty acids because insulin remains relatively low. This combination of overnight fasting and light movement creates a favorable environment for fat oxidation. Notice something important. The body did not suddenly flip from one fuel to another. It gradually shifted the balance. Between 12 and 16 hours, the transition becomes even more noticeable for many healthy adults. Liver glycogen continues to decline, although it is not necessarily empty. Insulin remains relatively low. The body relies more heavily on stored energy, and fatty acids become an increasingly important fuel source. Some people also notice that hunger changes during this stage. Instead of feeling constant hunger, it often comes in waves. A craving appears, peaks, and then fades away. Many people are surprised to discover that they actually feel more mentally focused than they expected. If fasting continues toward 16 to 24 hours, the body moves even further toward fat-dominant metabolism. Fat cells continue releasing fatty acids. The liver gradually increases ketone production, although the amount varies widely, depending on the individual, previous diet, activity level, and metabolic health. Even here, however, the body is still not burning only fat. Glucose continues playing an essential role. The brain, red blood cells, and several other tissues still require glucose, and the liver continues producing or releasing it as needed. This is why searching for one exact minute, when sugar burning stops and fat burning begins, is misleading. There is no universal hour that applies to everyone. Someone who ate a large late-night meal, rich in refined carbohydrates, may remain in the fed state longer than someone who ate a balanced dinner earlier in the evening. Someone with excellent insulin sensitivity may transition more efficiently than someone with insulin resistance. A person with more muscle mass may handle glucose differently than someone who is sedentary. Sleep quality, stress hormones, physical activity, meal composition, fasting experience, and overall metabolic health all influence how quickly the body changes its fuel preference. So the exact moment is not determined by a clock. It is determined by your biology. The body is constantly measuring hormone levels, available glycogen, circulating glucose, energy demand, and fuel availability before deciding which source should provide the next unit of energy. And while this remarkable transition is taking place, every major organ is playing its own unique role behind the scenes. To truly understand the fuel switch, we now need to look inside each organ and discover how they work together to make this transition possible. As your body gradually shifts from relying more on sugar to relying more on fat, no single organ makes the decision alone. This remarkable transition is coordinated by a network of organs that constantly communicate with one another through hormones, blood flow, and energy signals. Every organ has a different responsibility, yet together, they create one highly organized metabolic system. Let's begin with the brain. Your brain is one of the most energy-demanding organs in the body. During the early stages after a meal and throughout the first several hours of fasting, it still depends primarily on glucose. This is why your liver works so carefully to maintain stable blood sugar. Many people think that feeling hungry means the brain is running out of energy. Most of the time, that isn't true. Hunger is often a learned response to meal timing, rather than an actual fuel shortage. If you normally eat lunch at noon, your brain may trigger hunger around noon simply because it expects food. As fasting continues and metabolic flexibility improves, many people notice that these hunger waves become less intense. Instead of feeling controlled by cravings, they become better at recognizing the difference between true physical hunger and habitual eating. Now consider the liver. If the brain is the control center, the liver is the fuel manager. After every meal, the liver stores part of the incoming glucose as glycogen. Between meals, it gradually releases that stored glucose to keep blood sugar remarkably stable. As fasting continues, the liver slowly changes its priorities. Instead of storing energy, it begins managing stored fuel more actively. When glycogen becomes less available during longer fasting periods, the liver also begins producing ketones from fatty acids. Although significant ketone production usually becomes more noticeable after longer fasting windows, the liver is already preparing for that transition long before most people realize. Without the liver, the fuel switch would not happen smoothly. Next comes the pancreas. The pancreas constantly monitors blood glucose levels. After eating, it releases insulin to help move glucose into cells. As digestion finishes and blood sugar declines, insulin production decreases. This reduction in insulin is one of the strongest signals that allows fat cells to become more active. The pancreas is not simply responding to food, it is helping coordinate the body's decision about which fuel source should become more important. Now let's look at your muscles. Muscles are one of the largest storage sites for glycogen. After eating, they absorb glucose and store it for future movement. During gentle activities like walking, especially after several hours without food, muscles can increase their use of fatty acids while still using some glucose. This is one reason low-intensity exercise often pairs so well with fasting. However, intensity matters. During very high-intensity exercise, muscles still prefer glucose because it can produce energy more rapidly. This explains why sprinting feels very different from walking during a fasting window. Walking allows the body to comfortably increase fat oxidation without demanding enormous amounts of rapidly available glucose. Then we arrive at the fat cells. Many people imagine fat cells as inactive storage containers. In reality, they are highly responsive metabolic tissues. They constantly receive hormonal messages. When insulin is elevated, fat cells tend to hold on to stored energy. As insulin gradually falls, they become more willing to release fatty acids into the bloodstream. These fatty acids travel throughout the body, where muscles, the heart, and many other tissues can use them for energy. Visceral fat, the fat surrounding internal organs, appears especially responsive to repeated improvements in insulin sensitivity, healthy energy balance, and consistent physical activity. But this happens through thousands of repeated metabolic decisions, not one dramatic fasting session. The digestive system also plays an important role. As food stops arriving, the stomach empties, the intestines complete nutrient absorption, and digestive activity becomes much quieter. This reduction in workload allows the gut to spend less time processing incoming food and more time maintaining its normal function. Many people notice this as reduced bloating, a lighter feeling in the morning, and more regular digestion. Finally, the hormonal system coordinates the entire process. Ghrelin creates predictable hunger waves rather than constant hunger. Cortisol helps mobilize energy, especially in the morning. Small increases in adrenaline and noradrenaline during fasting help make stored fuel more available while keeping you alert and capable of normal activity. Together, these hormones allow the body to continue functioning efficiently even when food is temporarily unavailable. When you look at each organ individually, the transition from sugar to fat may seem complicated, but together, they perform an elegant balancing act. The brain monitors energy needs. The liver manages glucose and stored fuel. The pancreas adjusts insulin. The muscles change fuel preference based on activity. The fat cells release energy when hormonal conditions allow. The gut rests between meals, and the hormonal system keeps the entire process synchronized. This is why the shift from sugar burning to fat burning is not a single event. It is a coordinated biological conversation taking place throughout your entire body. And these internal changes explain why people often begin noticing meaningful improvements in everyday life, long before dramatic weight loss appears on the scale. Once your body becomes better at shifting between burning sugar and burning fat, the benefits extend far beyond weight loss. In fact, many people notice improvements long before the scale changes. These are signs that your metabolism is becoming more flexible, more efficient, and better prepared to handle everyday life. One of the first benefits is fewer energy crashes. Many people live in a constant cycle of eating, feeling energized for a short time, and then crashing a few hours later. They reach for another snack, another sugary drink, or another cup of coffee simply to feel normal again. As your body becomes more comfortable accessing stored fuel, those dramatic highs and lows often become less noticeable. Instead of depending on food every few hours, your energy begins feeling steadier throughout the day. Another major benefit is improved hunger control. At first, hunger may seem overwhelming whenever you delay a meal. But over time, many people discover something surprising. Hunger is not a steady downward slope. It comes in waves. A craving rises. It becomes stronger. Then, if you do not immediately eat, it often fades. Learning this changes your relationship with food. Instead of feeling controlled by every hunger signal, you begin understanding that your body has enough stored energy to keep functioning, while it smoothly transitions between fuel sources. Stable blood sugar is another important benefit. When you reduce constant grazing and allow insulin to rise and fall naturally, your body has more opportunities to restore normal metabolic rhythms. This does not cure metabolic disease, but it may support healthier glucose regulation as part of an overall healthy lifestyle. Walking during lower insulin periods can provide another advantage, because fat cells become more willing to release fatty acids when insulin is lower. Gentle activities such as walking may use a higher proportion of fat for energy, compared with the same activity immediately after a large meal. This does not mean one morning walk melts belly fat. It means repeated healthy habits gradually create conditions that support long-term visceral fat reduction. Perhaps the greatest benefit is confidence. Many people spend years believing they must eat every 2 or 3 hours, or their metabolism will shut down. After experiencing healthy fasting windows, they realize their body is far more adaptable than they imagined. They stop fearing temporary hunger. They trust their metabolism more. They become less dependent on constant snacking. However, there are also several common mistakes. The first mistake is searching for a magical hour. People often ask, exactly when do I start burning fat? But metabolism is not controlled by a stopwatch. It responds to hormones, activity, meal composition, sleep, and individual biology. Focusing on one exact number causes people to miss the much bigger picture. The second mistake is confusing fat burning with fat loss. During fasting, your body may increase fat oxidation. But if you later consume more calories than your body needs over time, overall body fat may not decrease. Burning fat during one fasting window and losing body fat over weeks or months are related, but they are not identical. The third mistake is performing extremely intense exercise while fasted. Some people believe harder is always better. Yet very intense workouts without adequate preparation may leave beginners exhausted, increase perceived stress, reduce exercise consistency, or encourage overeating later in the day. Moderate, sustainable movement often produces better long-term results. The fourth mistake is breaking a fast with a meal dominated by refined sugar. A large sugary meal rapidly raises blood glucose and insulin, shifting the body back toward glucose-dominant fuel use. A balanced meal containing protein, fiber, healthy fats, and minimally processed carbohydrates usually creates a smoother metabolic response. The fifth mistake is ignoring muscle. Muscle tissue is one of your greatest metabolic allies. It stores glycogen, improves insulin sensitivity, and helps your body manage glucose efficiently. Building and maintaining muscle through regular resistance training supports healthier fuel switching throughout life. Finally, never underestimate the importance of sleep. Poor sleep raises stress hormones, disrupts hunger regulation, weakens insulin sensitivity, and often increases cravings the following day. Even the best fasting routine cannot completely compensate for chronic sleep deprivation. So the goal is not to force your body into burning fat as quickly as possible. The goal is to help your metabolism become flexible enough to choose the right fuel at the right time. Now let's put all of this science into a practical daily routine that almost anyone can begin using safely and consistently. If you want to help your body become better at switching from burning sugar to burning fat, the first step is to stop chasing the perfect hour. There is no universal clock that suddenly announces, "Now you're burning fat." Instead, focus on creating healthy metabolic conditions that allow the transition to happen naturally. A simple place to begin is with a 12-hour overnight fast. Finish dinner at around 7 in the evening and eat breakfast around 7 the next morning. Once this feels comfortable, some healthy adults may gradually extend the fasting window to 14 or 16 hours if it fits their lifestyle and after considering any medical conditions they may have. Walking can also be used strategically. A comfortable 20 to 30-minute walk before breakfast or several hours after your last meal allows your muscles to become active during a lower insulin period. This does not guarantee faster belly fat loss, but it can support greater fat oxidation while improving insulin sensitivity and blood sugar control. Your meals matter just as much as your fasting window. Build each meal around quality protein, fiber-rich vegetables, whole fruits, healthy fats, legumes, nuts, seeds, and minimally processed carbohydrates. These foods help create a steadier blood sugar response and reduce the dramatic insulin spikes that make the body rely heavily on incoming glucose. Strength training is another powerful tool. More muscle gives your body a larger and healthier place to store glucose as glycogen. It also improves insulin sensitivity, making it easier for your metabolism to switch smoothly between fuel sources. And never overlook sleep. A full night's sleep helps regulate cortisol, ghrelin, leptin, insulin sensitivity, and overall metabolic flexibility. In many ways, good sleep prepares your body to make better fuel choices before you even eat your first meal. So, what is the exact moment your body switches from burning sugar to burning fat? The answer is that there is no single universal moment. Your body gradually changes the proportion of fuel it uses. As insulin falls, liver glycogen becomes more important, fat cells release more fatty acids, and muscles begin relying on a greater percentage of stored fat, especially during rest, overnight fasting, and low-intensity activities like walking. The speed of this transition depends on your previous meal, your activity level, your muscle mass, your insulin sensitivity, your sleep, your stress levels, and your overall metabolic health. Your metabolism is not controlled by a stopwatch. It is guided by biology. The more consistently you support that biology, with balanced meals, regular movement, quality sleep, healthy fasting habits, and long-term consistency, the more efficiently your body learns to move between burning sugar and burning fat. That is the real metabolic switch. Not a single moment, a healthier way of living. If you enjoyed this science-based explanation, subscribe for more videos about fasting, walking, blood sugar, insulin, visceral fat, metabolism, and healthy aging. And let us know in the comments, when do you personally feel your energy becomes the most stable during a fasting window?